Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome from wherever around the world you are. Whether you are in Ireland or Trinidad and Tobago or Kenya or Zambia or Scotland, South Africa, London, the United States, Canada, Australia, wherever you are, welcome to the Israel Brief. I'm Rolene Marks. As I mentioned, this is the Israel Brief, where we take a look at those top stories every Monday to Thursday in the company of the best community in the world. As always, we are brought to you in conjunction with Lay of the Land, and more about where you can find Lay of the Land a little later in the show. It is day 439. We still have 100 hostages being held in untenable conditions in the Gaza Strip. I look so forward to the day where I stop having to count down the days and where there are no more hostages held captive, that everyone has been returned home. The living to start the recovery process, the deceased to be laid to rest in a place where their families can go to weep. So let's take a look at those top stories, and we begin with news about the hostages and negotiations. According to sources both in the Hamas camp and in the Israeli camp, it looks like there is positive momentum. Now, Israeli officials are being very, very careful because, of course, we have been down this road before. We have been down the road where we think that a deal is imminent and Hamas change the goalposts. Yesterday, the White House spokesperson, John Kirby appealed to Hamas not to put any more obstacles in place. Now, according to the Saudi daily Al-Sharq Al-Awsat that publishes out of London, we are in a crucial phase of the negotiations. Meanwhile, in Israel today, thousands of children from middle school and high school engaged in a walkout in a demand for a deal to be made so that the hostages can be returned. President Herzog met earlier today with President-elect Trump's envoy on hostage negotiations. Meanwhile, I just want to address something with regards to the hostages, because I know there are many of you watching from countries around the world, and I am aware of the issue of lists, supposed lists circulating with the names of hostages to be released on. And I want to address something as somebody who's a working journalist here. And I just want to apologize for the construction work happening in the background with our neighbor. The only people who are party to lists are the people in those negotiating rooms. Nobody else. Facebook, other social media platforms are not the places for news about the hostages. This is a very, very sensitive matter, and it pertains to the security of our hostages in Gaza. We don't want to endanger their security, their lives in any way, shape or form. And we don't want to add to the already massive trauma of their families. So if you are watching and you hear about lists and lists circulating, please don't participate in it. The only people who have access to information are the negotiating teams, and they're not going to share it with the public. The only places to get verified news about the hostages will come from the IDF, will come from the Hostages and Missing Persons Forum, and will come from the government itself. Please, if you see lists, if you see speculation, please don't participate or share in it. These families have gone through hell, and some of them have complained that they have found out about the death of their loved ones by somebody blurting it out on social media before the IDF has had a chance to talk to them. So I hope that makes that clear. Now, a war of words is brewing between Ireland and Israel. This follows the announcement earlier this week that Israel is going to close our embassy in Ireland for their extremely anti-Israel policies. The foreign minister, Gideon Sa'ar, said this is a decision that was not taken lightly, but the policies are extremely hostile to the Jewish state. Meanwhile, yesterday, President Michael Higgins, the Irish president, accused Israel of invading the sovereignty of 3 countries. And I'm going to read to you what he said. He says, calling the Irish anti-Semites is gross slander. Now, he said this during a ceremony to accept the credentials of the ambassador of Palestine to Ireland. I mean, you can't make this up. He says, it is a very serious business to actually brand a people because of the fact that they disagree with Prime Minister Netanyahu, who is in breach of so many bits of international law and has breached the sovereignty of Lebanon, Syria, and Egypt. Really? Egypt? That's news to us. And would like to have settlement in each of them. I'm going to read to you our foreign minister's response before I unpack the president's comments. Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar says, the president, in a show of lies, justifies my decision to close the Israeli embassy in the anti-Semitic country. He's spreading slander about Israel. Israel was attacked by Hezbollah without any reason, but in his alternate reality, it is Israel that has violated its sovereignty. So let's unpack this. First of all, to make these statements while you are receiving the credentials of the Palestinian ambassador for a state that doesn't exist is absolutely preposterous. Second of all, with regards to criticism of Prime Minister Netanyahu, criticizing the Prime Minister and the government is the national sport in Israel. I know some of you don't like to hear that Israelis are very, very critical of the Prime Minister and have a very complicated relationship with him. But that's the reality here in Israel. We are a very, very vibrant democracy. So criticizing Prime Minister Netanyahu doesn't make you anti-Semitic. And the president did not criticize Netanyahu. He made ludicrous comments, including blaming Israel for leaking a letter to the Iranian president that was leaked by the Iranians. There is the joining of South Africa's case at the ICJ while calling on the definition of genocide to be extended or expanded so that it can be applied to Israel, who's not committing genocide. It is the gaslighting of the Jewish community in Ireland who have expressed their concerns about anti-Semitism. It is the education of hatred of Jews and Israel in textbooks, in Irish schools. And it is these ludicrous accusations that Israel has violated the sovereignty of 3 countries. So let's talk about Lebanon. Hezbollah began to fire rockets and drones and anti-tank missiles on Israeli populations in the north of the country on the 8th of October. It took till nearly the end of the year of this year for there to be Israeli boots on the ground in Lebanon to push back Hezbollah, who were in violation of Resolution 1701. Right now, the ceasefire is holding. Syria. Israel has not invaded Syria. Israel has gone into the buffer zone on the Syrian side of Mount Hermon to ensure that hostile entities do not encroach on our sovereignty and to destroy military assets belonging to the Assad government, which I think is pleasing Syrian civilians because they no longer are tortured and murdered by those military assets. Egypt. Egypt is Israel's peace partner. Israel has not set foot into Egypt unless, of course, it is the negotiating team to secure the release of the hostages, who President Higgins forgets to even mention. I mean, while we're on the subject of hostages, we can't forget the former TASAC, Leo Varadkar, who when Emily Hand, who had dual Irish and Israeli citizenship when she was released in the ceasefire agreement after she was taken hostage, he said she was lost and has been found. What was she? A sock? She wasn't a sock lost in the laundry, Mr. Varadkar. She was a child who saw her loved ones slaughtered before being taken hostage and traumatized in Gaza. So now I'll get off my soapbox. The Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs has welcomed the decision by Japan, China, and the United Kingdom to lower their travel advisory to Israel. Advisories were put in place because of the hostilities between Hezbollah and Israel, and because of the possibility of an impending Iranian attack. Well, so far the ceasefire is holding. The only rockets that we seem to be receiving are the odd ones coming from Gaza and those missiles coming from the Houthis in Yemen, which have been intercepted. The ministry went on to say that this will increase economic and tourism ties between the countries. And finally, Prime Minister Netanyahu, speaking from the Syrian side of the Golan yesterday, or the Hermon yesterday, said that Israel will maintain a presence in that buffer zone on the Syrian side of the Hermon until an arrangement that can ensure Israel's security will be found. He said troops must be prepared to deploy until the end of 2025, that is a distinct possibility. However, he has stressed, along with the foreign minister and the defense minister, that this is a limited temporary measure. The Prime Minister went on to speak about the last time he was on the Hermon, and that was during his army service some 50 or so years ago. Meanwhile, the first commercial flight out of Syria took off earlier today with the flag adjusted to have 3 instead of 2 stars on it as a symbol of independence from the Assad regime. And on the subject of Assad, that brings me to the audience question of today, and it comes from Stephen, who says, can Assad be taken to the ICJ and the ICC? Great question. So let's unpack the ICJ. Unfortunately, you can't take him as an individual to the ICJ because the ICJ only settles disputes and cases between states. If Syria was taken to the ICJ, that's a different possibility. And with regards to the ICC, the International Criminal Court, this is an interesting one because Syria is not a signatory to the Rome Statute. However, neither is Israel, and yet the ICC saw fit to issue warrants of arrest against our leaders. And also the state of Palestine, which is a signatory, does not exist. So will the ICC be hypocritical and suddenly those laws appeal to it now when they have to deal with Assad? Well, let's just wait and see. In the meantime, guys, don't forget to send me those mentions and morons of the week. Sadly, the moron list is growing longer than the mensch list. And in the meantime, don't forget to check out our website at www.layoftheland.online, our Facebook page at Lottle's site, our YouTube channel right here at the Israel Brief. We are on Instagram at Rolene_Marks, on X at Lay of the Land 5, LinkedIn at Rolene Marks. And guys, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. God bless you all, and I will see you again tomorrow. Bye for now.